Always great to catch up with the wonderful, faithful warriors of the Thomas More Society. Special counsel Paul Jonna is on the phone with us. So, Paul, I know there's some good news in this case for those of us who believe that parents should have something to say about what happens to their children in school and with their lives. This is out of California, so bring us up to date, and then we'll take it from there after you kind of give us an overview of this case, Mirabelli versus Olson.
Sure, yes. So basically, the California Department of Education was forcing school districts in California to facilitate young children's social transitions in secret and to keep that information away from their own parents. And our clients found out about this policy, devout Catholic and Christian teachers, and they didn't want to comply with it. And actually, it was passed in secret during the pandemic. And we filed a federal lawsuit asking the policy to be enjoined, and the court issued a groundbreaking preliminary injunction finding that these policies likely violate the First Amendment rights of teachers and the 14th Amendment rights of parents. And so that really should have put an end to this issue in California, but unfortunately, government officials have sort of doubled down on this losing issue, and they're continuing to sort of go after school districts that want to provide for common sense notification to parents if their own children are identifying as the opposite gender at school. But fortunately, the case is poised for a very big win. We've made it styled it as a class action now, and the analysis the judge provided is so thorough and so comprehensive. Really, the writing is on the wall. These policies are going to be, scrapped permanently, I think, very, very soon.
When we see cases like this, and we see that this is something that's passed secretively during COVID, and when people find out what's going on, I mean, the reaction, you and I were talking about this during the break, the reaction to me is pretty similar across the board, regardless of where people stand politically. You look at this out in the news in general, and when it comes to this issue of gender ideology, not only with sports, but with parental involvement, I mean, this is like a 90-10 issue. The majority of people, regardless of where they stand again politically, are saying, look, I care about my kid. I want to know what's going on.
That's exactly true. That's what's fascinating about this. The fact that the governor, the attorney general, all of these radical left-wing ideologues are pushing this issue, despite the fact that, it's common sense. Whether you're pro-LGBT or not, parents should be involved in their kids' development. I mean, the state is assuming that parents are going to be harmful to their kids if they learn that they have gender confusion. Well, the exact opposite should be the assumption. Fit parents act in their children's best interest. And so it's kind of a common sense position. And unfortunately, litigation sometimes is required to get to the bottom of this stuff, but really it shouldn't be. It's so clear.
We're talking with Paul Jonna, special counsel for the Thomas More Society in a case out of California. So how soon will this be resolved, do you think?
Well, honestly, ever since we received that preliminary injunction ruling, in my opinion, it was resolved. But the state is, unfortunately, they need to be beaten into submission. We saw this during COVID with the closure of churches. I mean, there was Supreme Court rulings saying these are unconstitutional, but California was just ignoring them. So probably later this year we'll get a final judgment in our favor. And the Trump administration recently issued a letter to the state saying they're also investigating this, so that should help accelerate the demise of this whole system of gender secrecy. But I think later this year there should be some very significant updates in the case.
And I think we were talking during the break also, Paul, about the fact that so much happened during COVID, and there's such a negative fallout. We see what happened with the education of children and how badly kids suffered when they shut down the schools and they had to go to online learning. I mean, there was a lot that came out. We saw what happened during many of these school meetings where parents were just going to these school meetings and asking questions, and they were called terrorists, and they were dragged out because they wanted to, find out what was going on with their kids on a number of different levels. In some ways, though, COVID, to me, is a Romans 8:28 situation, because he really got to the bottom of a lot of the nonsense that was going on, both in public schools but also in government around the country.
That's absolutely true. I mean, parents had no idea these policies were even passed. We found out for the first time. A lot of them found out for the first time after we filed this case. So just exposing this evil and this darkness is so necessary. One of our parent plaintiffs in the case, they didn't even know that their daughter was identifying as the opposite gender until she attempted suicide. And basically, the school had been aware. They were facilitating this transition, and obviously this young girl needed some help, and her parents weren't able to provide it because they didn't know. So these are real dangerous policies, and thank God they're being exposed and shut down for good.
What's so imbalanced and really, I think, insane is I'm sure these same schools, the same school district has rules where parents have to be brought in if a child is given an aspirin or a Tylenol, or if a child expresses another need medically. And yet something like this, something as life-altering as so-called transitioning, which we know can never really happen, but facilitating, the phrase you used in listening to you, facilitating the transition. So they were involved in these kids saying, well, I want to be a girl or I want to be a boy. And yet they would demand a parent to show up if a child had a cold and needed to go home from school.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. What they're arguing is so ridiculous. They're saying, well, that's different. That's a medical decision. And we have renowned experts in the case who are saying, listen, facilitating a young kid's social transition, that's medical intervention. That's a psychological intervention because it has a severe psychological effect on a kid. So, and that's actually a very big issue in this case that we have the ability to sort of differentiate from other cases where that record wasn't developed. So we have very strong expert testimony that's going to be provided to the court showing the medical nature of this kind of a policy and how it affects kids psychologically.
Well, what's the response from these school officials when they're posed with this? I mean, how do they have such a disconnect in their brains over this stuff?
Well, it's the far left, special interest groups that drafted these policies, gave it to the state, and honestly, I don't know how much thought they gave to any of this because it's so irrational and so ridiculous. They cite statistics about suicide, but all of their data is so flawed. It's just talking points at this point. And honestly, it's so clear that this is such a all this is going to crumble pretty soon. They have no real scientific justification or medical or any justification for this stuff. It's just radical left-wing nonsense, and it's being exposed as such.
I'm wondering, and I know that this hasn't come to fruition yet, but I mean, if with your expertise as a lawyer and handling a lot of these cases, to me, just from a reporter's perspective, like looking at pulling out, as we say in broadcasting, when you have a camera, you zoom out, you look at all these detransitioners, as they refer to themselves, who are opening their eyes and realizing that this was a bad thing, that they made this decision to try and, which again can't be possible, but to change their sex or identify as something that they're not. But to me, this is class, and I'm not a lawyer, you are. This is class action lawsuit material, is it not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have actually a number of cases for detransitioners. The thing is, these cases can be very individualized. Class actions are normally more apt for situations where there's common proof. But we have a number of we're representing Chloe Cole, Kayla Lovedahl, Clementine Breen, a whole host of these girls in major cases against their doctors. But the litigation is going to be overwhelming. I mean, we're getting calls regularly about these kinds of cases. So it should really help accelerate. I think the U.S. is a little bit behind the curve. A lot of other countries have stopped providing this kind of treatment to minors.
Absolutely.
We're heading in that direction here too.
I mean, it's like we're not even paying attention to what's happening in these countries that are considered even much more left than we are. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the UK, for example, which has lost its mind in terms of religious freedom and what's happening there with people praying outside of abortion facilities, and that woman getting arrested holding a sign saying, we need to talk. I mean, really, that's a whole other story. But here's Great Britain, which is so liberal, and they've put a kibosh on the puberty blockers because whistleblowers are realizing the pressure that these kids are put under without really examining them psychologically or doing all the things that they promised to do.
Yeah, and the bottom line is these young kids can't provide consent to life-altering, surgical interventions of this nature. I mean, they have no idea what they're getting themselves into, and it's so obviously wrong and unethical and harmful. So I'm confident we're heading in that direction in the U.S. It's unfortunate it's taken this long, but I think with the recent actions of this administration and a lot of the litigation that's ongoing, I think it's inevitable that it will happen soon.
Well, also, along with your great legal work, Paul, we appreciate it. Paul Jonna, special counsel with the Thomas More Society, with an update on this case, and he'll be back on when everything gets finalized, but it looks like it's definitely, as he said, thanks be to God, moving in that direction.